Throughout the history of man, the euphoria of victory and devastation of defeat have been felt in many ways. The fighting of wars is arguably the oldest and most prominent zero-sum game humans can play. Whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. War, considered as sport to some, the elites playing God over the lives and lands of its inhabitants for their own illusions of grandeur. War heroes could be considered great sportsmen of their time. The symbolically sporty Theodore Roosevelt, who was the 26th American president and the 33rd governor of New York before that, said, "Aggressive fighting for the right is the noblest sport the world affords." So today, we will be looking at Teddy and how he shaped American society through the lens of sports and war, then look at two of the arguably best sportsmen of war from the past, Napoleon Bonaparte and his proclaimed idol, Hannibal Barca. All three men come from three completely different eras and backgrounds, but their gamesmanship in battle is what has separated them from the rest in the history books. But the uniqueness of Teddy Roosevelt is his incorporation of warfare into the psyche of traditional American sport.
Roosevelt then led the charge up San Juan Hill, while his regiment of Rough Riders followed up without hesitation. Despite heavy casualties inflicted by high-ground Spanish troops, San Juan Heights would be taken within the hour. 2 weeks later, the 3-month-long Spanish-American War would be over.
Teddy Roosevelt was a perpetual motion machine. He never stopped.
Teddy Roosevelt was not well when he was young. He was sickly. And one of the results of that was he overcompensated in some ways to prove how strong he was.
He believes that leading the strenuous life brought him sort of personal health, personal achievement, and he extrapolates that into a philosophy that's good not only for him personally, but for the nation.
Teddy Roosevelt is a very energetic person, a very active person. He comes into the White House with this active presence.
Roosevelt was quoted saying, "I believe in rough games and in rough manly sports. I do not feel any particular sympathy for the person who gets battered about a good deal so long as it's not fatal." Well, it was.
When 19 players died and 137 suffered serious injuries during the 1905 season, it was nearly game over. Calls for the sport to be banned made it all the way to the White House, where passionate football fan Teddy Roosevelt decided to intervene and save the game. On October 9th, he invited the head coaches and alumni leaders of the top universities to Washington, D.C. for crunch talks. 19 new rules were approved.
When studying Bonaparte, you will realize quickly he is extremely rare amongst the other top generals in history. In 43 battles, he won 38 and lost only 5. Napoleon overcame odds in 17 of his victories and commanded at a disadvantage in all 5 of his losses. No other general comes close to Napoleon in total battles and wars. Within this graphic, he is on the top right, alone with no one around him. Julius Caesar was the closest, but Caesar did not face many refined militaries under United Nations from his era. Most of his battles were against tribes from the countryside, the Gauls. Napoleon also had double the amount of official wars than Caesar. These were the biggest differences between the two. In sports terms, Napoleon had a much harder strength of schedule and played a lot more games, which is why the 43 battles Bonaparte fought in and who he fought against solidifies him as the modern-day war GOAT. He had an overwhelming sense of his own importance. Among the images he fostered were those of the man of destiny and the great man who masters luck. Creating his own myth magnifies your own legacy status. Napoleon was well aware of that and crystallizes his legacy for those to witness centuries later via artwork. With as many problems and deaths Hannibal Barca caused for the Roman Empire during the Second Punic War, they respected him and saw him as a worthy and admirable adversary, ringing his name throughout their own history books to never forget the name. The saying Hannibal ad portas means Hannibal is at the gates. A refrain describing Hannibal's near conquest of Rome was used to scare naughty Roman children for decades after his death. Even in his own time, Hannibal Barca left an indelible legacy. Roman generals like Scipio Africanus, who pardoned Hannibal after the Battle of Zama, respected him immensely. Scipio's studies of Hannibal's tactics influenced Roman military strategies for centuries. Prominent generals such as Napoleon acknowledged Hannibal as one of the greatest commanders in military history. Glory is promoted in loss when it comes to sports and war.